Hey
Today we're
there.
talking about aromatherapy.
We
So
we
what do you do?
are. So welcome everyone to another episode of The Healer's Corner. We have found Hank again and have him to come back and join about aromatherapy and the healing benefits. Um, oh, she's loving your shirt there, Hank.
Oh, thank you.
Because aromatherapy, I feel like, and you and I have talked about this a lot in the store, Hank, about it's almost got this false perceptive of like all aromatherapy is safe no matter how you use it. And
Yeah.
that's not the case. So, you are an actual certified aromatherapist, and you actually taught me some stuff of like, yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah,
And
and the way my teacher, we were probably on the way more conservative side for things. But here's, I think people fall into the trap where we have this whole thing that if it's natural, it's good for you, and that's not necessarily the case. And George would always say, poison ivy, it's natural.
so is
Is
arsenic.
that good for you? So is arsenic. So is cyanide. All these things are natural. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you.
Mhm.
And you got to treat it with respect, especially with oils, because, and we'll get into that, how concentrated they are compared if you're doing like an herbal tea.
So that being said, Hank, why don't you give us a little background on yourself and how did you get into aromatherapy?
Well, so that's a great question. So I was going to school at Fellowships of the Spirit for the 2 year program, the spiritual healing and prophecy program. And everything I was learning was like for like emotional body, the mental body, spiritual body, and not much for the physical body. So if someone came to me and they had a cold or a headache, it's like, well, what do I do for them? Like I know Reiki is good. It seems to be more geared towards the spiritual side, then it kind of trickles down. So I started looking for modalities that had an effect more on the physiological body. And I found two things, which I look at both aromatherapy and sound healing as bridging modalities where there's science behind it, but then there's also a little bit of woo. And that's how I found aromatherapy. And I jokingly say that aromatherapy actually saved my marriage because my in-laws before we got married, they Googled me, and at the time, if you Googled Hank Setala, it would just come up with all the, like pages and pages of psychic fairs and all these events, and they literally thought Anya was a crazy person, and they weren't into anything that I was doing. But we're in Alaska, and there's 21 different types of mosquitoes in Alaska. They even have T-shirts that say it's the national bird with like pictures of all the varieties. And Anya and I are just using a little bottle of lavender, putting a little drop on her wrist, rubbing it on like that. She got bit like once. I got bit 0 times. And her parents are using off and cut or spraying, and they're still like smacking like 2 or 3 at a time. And her dad, towards the end of the trip, he's like, "What is that stuff you're using?" And I'm like, "It's lavender. Would you like to try some?" And he tried it. It worked. And he said, "Hank, I don't understand what you do, but maybe you're not so crazy."
No, you are, Hank. You are. We'll
I
just
am, but not for the reasons they think. Or maybe those two. But that's really what it was. Is like if someone has something physical going on, whether it's bugs bothering you or a headache or hormone type things, aromatherapy has the chemical components in those oils that help with all those things. And a lot of modern day pharmaceuticals come from, guess where? Essential oils. It comes from the study of aromatic plants. And then they find the one chemical in the rose that's good for depression out of the 350 chemicals and say, let's isolate that one and synthesize it. And now you have, you know, antidepressants and things like that. So a lot of that stuff comes from the research of essential oils.
now you mentioned rose, and I remember when you first told me how many dozen roses it takes,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Holy cow, no wonder why that one is real rose
Mm.
oil is so expensive."
Yeah. And that's why like with rose and like expensive things like jasmine, rose, they typically you don't find straight distillations very often. It would be like $1,000 for like a little thing of rose. But what they'll often do is take all the plant material, wrap it in like a cloth, soak it in like an ethanol or other solvent, and then they distill all of that. And that's called an absolute. And you'll get like a little thing of rose for like $55 or something like that. But the pure rose essential oil is just very hard. Well, you can buy it if you have the money, but that's why it's so expensive because it's like the petals from 36 dozen roses, I believe, 36 makes one drop of oil. And to give another example, 220 pounds of lavender makes 1 pound of oil. So it takes a huge volume of plant matter to make a very small amount of oils, especially in the case of rose or jasmine.
Mm. That just blew my mind. I'm like, "Well, that explains the
Mhm.
pricing on some of these," and, made me side eye some of these oils that you see really cheap, in grocery stores now too, kind of like, I don't trust that one."
Mhm.
S Especially when it's like $5 for you know?
Well, yeah, if you see oils and they're all the same price, that's a red flag because if they're the same price, how is that possible when lavender is usually like one price and then Roman chamomile might be a lot more because it just the yield is different. But if you see them all the same price, that's like a huge raise an eyebrow type of situation. If you see dust on it, they're not rotating stock, that's a red flag situation. You want to make sure you get a good oil that's not been aging on the shelf because they do lose potency over time.
Mhm.
Mostly, there's a couple exceptions, but you want to make sure you're getting a recent good oil that isn't having any funny business going on.
So, I guess we should get into some of your talking points that you supplied. I love
Mhm.
it. I open up the document and I'm like, well, Hank too gives me a little novelist, but
I
broken
was
down
copy and
really
pasting
well.
from the book I wrote because I realized there's so much I will forget myself. So I wrote my own manual for when I teach it. So I use my reference my points as a
Thank you,
reference point.
Jen.
So yeah.
So, do you want to jump into history, or is there another part of this that you would rather talk about? Maybe with how
You
are
know,
you being guided?
well, just with history, this has been around since like even the times of Christ. They gave those essential oils in the story in the Bible, like frankincense and myrrh, because they were so medicinal. Like frankincense is a bronchodilator; you naturally get more oxygen. Myrrh is antiviral, antibacterial, all these things. So like, there's reference points in history that long many years ago using it. And then during the Black Plague, the people who suffered the least were like perfumists that were using oils in their work, and they had a much lower incidence of the Black Plague. So like, there was these little spots in history that where you can see where they've been using them. But the real big one is I forget the pronunciation of the name. There was a French chemist who burned his hand and plunged it into a vat of what he thought was water, but was lavender oil, and the burning stopped, it healed completely, and he dedicated his entire life to the study of aromatic plants. And that's where we get the name today, aromatherapy. It is not just inhalation, it's also topical and different things like that. But that's where the real birthing of modern day aromatherapy came from, was from this French chemist.
All because he made the mistake of shoving his hand in the
Yeah.
wrong place.
And then it's like, oh, that's oh wow, that's healed. That's wow, that's perfect. What is this stuff? And then, it went from just being maybe focused around perfume and scents and things. Because when the perfume industry, they use all these things too, but they're more interested in the scents and the
Mhm.
evaporation rates. Because you might hear the terms in perfume, there's a top note, a middle note, a bottom note. And it's the rate at which the oils evaporate off. So you feel that first one first, and then the middle note. And then as you're wearing the perfume over time, it actually can change based on what scents are in the perfume. So there was a whole different view of aromatherapy and how you would blend things together based on the scents when you're looking at it more for a perfume type thing versus alternative therapy.
Versus adding, some lemon, to your water, you know? How does that smell?
Well, that's ingestion, and that's a whole nother. But we can go there wherever, whenever you want, in terms of like the different uses and how to use it and all that jazz. So.
So you started off in the beginning. Now how does that relate more into modern day? How are we, seeing that more?
Well, with the rise, what we found with talking to George before he passed, my teacher, George Cox, he's the founder of Natural Options Aromatherapy, and it was through his school that I got my certification. What he saw across the board is that when we started to see a lot of these high deductible medical plans, and people would need to go in and they're paying full price for that office visit, or they're paying $10 for a copay, and then they still need the medicine and all this stuff, that if you're spending $50 out of pocket, maybe try a $10 bottle of oil. And when you look at like England, where you could actually get a prescription for peppermint for a headache, for example, like people started like researching themselves, advocating for themselves, and there was like people looking really empowering themselves of what can I do for myself without having to spend the $50 here, all that stuff adding up, and then you also have it for your whole family by one little bottle. So like I think that's just we have natural cures, natural things you could do with the evolution of modern day medicine. It's just like, oh, those are old wives' tales. And now people are brought into the whole traditional medical, and now people are going back to the natural stuff, saying maybe they were onto something. So we're just seeing like a full cycle back to getting back to roots, which is timely as we're getting back to the earth, I believe. That's a whole tangent conversation. But as we're getting closer to our roots and closer to nature again and things like that, I think it's a natural place that people are starting to look for their solutions.
Mhm. I mean, I think our ancestors way back on were way more into good stuff than they're given credit for. Like you said, the old
Mhm.
wives' tales, like what it wasn't real. No,
Yep.
actually, it was.
When Max was a baby, which is my oldest son, we were going to our physician, and he had like some intestinal things going on, and Anya wanted like asked the doctor about fennel tea. And the doctor said, "Oh, that's an old wives' tale." But if you go to Germany, their medical doctors, it's approved by their medical thing. So like it's a night and day difference of what like from country to country, even like what is accepted. If you're going as a medical doctor in Germany, one of your electives is aromatherapy. It's not here. So like there's a huge emphasis on pharmaceuticals, and that could be a result of all kinds of different things, lobbying, or just like this is how it started and this is what people are doing. But you'll find also doctors, like we've had at the expo, we had a lot of physicians that were looking at the holistic picture. So it's not all,
Mhm,
but like that traditional coming out of medical school, this is what all the things that you're told to do, and like all these other things. Like when we asked about the thing for Max, oh, that's an old wives' tale, and we switched doctors because of that. And then the new doctor was way more open to aromatherapy and things, and when we brought things like that up, she's like, oh yeah, absolutely, try that. She'll give us from her own pointers, and if that doesn't cut it, here's the prescription. If you need it, fill it. If not, that's no problem. So like we had a whole different experience when we switched to a different doctor that just had a little bit of a more of a crossing of worlds, if you will.
there seems to be more of like an uptick, I guess, in the medical industry of like functional or integrative medicine going on, which is a great thing, you know. And everybody's heard me say this before, except Hank, you weren't on with us. But when I joked with my doctor and was like, "Yeah, I think all of these things that you guys can't catch in blood work is just my alien showing up." And when she could look me straight in the face and go, "There might be more to that than you realize," and I'm like, "Oh, I like you. We're gonna be fine." So I'm like, "Yep, you're it for me. Thanks." But
Yeah,
I like the uptick in that bringing back that old healing way back in.
yeah.
Um,
And I applaud the clinic. They actually did double blind placebo studies on Reiki. And I knew one of the people that was one of the real practitioners, and they would go in and they would take like vital signs and things before and after treatments. And there were some like
Mhm.
real Reiki masters and some fake. And now you can, when you go in for surgery, you can opt to have Reiki done. So like there's
Mhm.
been a huge um, it's coming along. The worlds are getting closer together. But it's
Mhm.
our job being in the middle of those two worlds. How can you advocate for yourself? And George would always talk about his class. He's like, if I have a heart attack, he's like, don't do Reiki, don't do this. Call 911. He was very practical. Like, there's a reason, there's a purpose for this modern day medicine. It's very good
mhm.
at these things, but then there's other places where there's a lack, and where you really want to take the best from both worlds and learn, advocate for yourself, and find trusted sources for information, and go from there.
Yeah, I believe they complement, not one instead of the other necessarily.
Mhm.
Right.
So, what are the different ways of using, aromatherapy? I see you have like inhalation, topical, bath. Um,
Yeah. Well, one of the things, like if you have oils in your home already, or Goddess Elite carries oils, so like you could go get some if you don't have any. But just on a cotton ball, you could take a couple different drops of different things depending what you want to do. Like if you're having congestion, like eucalyptus is common. It's even in Vicks Vapor Rub for babies. It has eucalyptus in there, just to give you an example. And Roman chamomile or Ravensara. There's all kinds of different ones, and you put whatever you need in the cotton ball in a bag, and whenever you need it, you open it up. Like Yang Lang, for example, is really good allegedly for anxiety. And I just say that because I'm not a medical doctor. None of us here are claiming to treat, diagnose, cure any disease. But I may have read a thing or two about anxiety helping with panic attacks and things like that. So if you have like a little thing of oil on a cotton ball, you open the bag when you need it, or they have fancier like little inhalers, like those Vicks Vapo inhalers. You can get those empty and you can put your own oils in them. So like they're like for breathing easy, which is one of the ones that we have, and my mom swears by it. It has like peppermint, it has frankincense, it has ravensara, all these different things for breathing. So
Mhm.
that's one way. Or if you'd rather do it as a candle, an unscented white candle, let it go, get a pool of wax, blow the candle out because oils are flammable, then put a couple drops in the liquid wax and light the candle again, and you'll use your own candle to diffuse it. So, like, or you can use those little actual diffusers with the mist, which I believe
Mm.
you have too in the store, or you did if you
Yeah.
don't know. So there's all these different ways. And if you need something like overnight, you can get one with an intermittent setting. So it's on for 10 seconds or 30 seconds, off for 30 seconds, and you can diffuse something all through the night. Because what if you have like sleep apnea? And it's not a
Mhm.
bad case. And what if you were to diffuse frankincense, which is a bronchodilator and maybe another thing that's good for breathing? What if that avoided you having to live wearing a CPAP every night? Of course, do it with the guidance of your doctor, but there's like just with inhalation, those couple suggestions that has huge potential for changing one's life. For topical, you're putting it in a cream, and you want to make sure. Well, we'll talk about dilution rates and everything, but you don't want to. It always goes less is more in aromatherapy. You don't need a lot. Like 1 drop of peppermint oil is equivalent to drinking 30 cups of peppermint tea. So, like when you're thinking about aromatherapy, always go like less is more. You don't need a lot in order to do good work or whatnot, but you just put a couple drops in an unscented cream or an oil, nothing with petrolatum, that's like petroleum jelly because it seals the skin. But then you can put it in the cream and just rub it in. And if you have a stomach issue and you're using stuff for stomach, you're rubbing it into where the areas are afflicting you. If you have a headache, you're rubbing it into the temples after you dilute it. You don't want, there's very few oils that use neat because they can actually be irritating to the skin if you're not putting it in a cream. But that's a method. Putting it in a bath, a little water and salt, put your oils in, draw your bath, add that at the end. That salt will help suspend the water. Otherwise, it just floats on top. But if you want your whole body to be absorbing it, put a little salt in a cup first, let everything dissolve, add it to the bath at the end, swish it around, get in. Your whole body underneath the water is going to be getting the benefits of those oils.
I think the, that bath method that you just explained out for everybody, I think a lot of people have just assumed they just, you know, dab it into the water after the bathtub's filled, and I'm like, "Don't you notice that it's just kind of floating,
Yeah.
on the top?" So I'm like, "Oh, you're wasting your oil in a way because 'cause you're
Yeah.
not absorbing."
You are. And I mean, if you had like a cold or something, you could also just plug the tub and just put a dropper full of something in and just like breathe in while you're taking a shower. But for a bath, if you don't do some sort of suspension, then you're just going to be absorbing it right where the skin is coming into contact with the water.
Mm,
And it's not necessarily wasting your oil, but your absorption rate isn't going to be the same because it's a much smaller amount. Versus like if you do the salt technique, then the whole tub all has oil in it, and you're you know
Mhm.
getting that
Mhm.
huge benefit.
Yeah, that's what we do in pranic healing. When we suggest people the next day after a healing, they
Hmm.
if they can't take a bath, that would be great. Salt first, fill up the
Yep.
tub, then the oil.
mhm,
And
yeah,
salt is naturally detoxifying anyway. You're getting the benefit
Mhm.
of the oil and pulling out negativity or helping the energy system neutralize because of the salt. So the salt in and of itself is great. And then you're adding the oils in on it. But again, less is more. And if you're doing a bath, ladies, you don't want to use hot oils. You guys too. Like if you're using cinnamon in a bath, bad idea. Even like too much
Mhm.
pepper in a bath. Like you can get, especially in really sensitive areas, you want to be mindful of like what type of oils you're doing there. You'll be safe
Mhm.
with like lavender, Roman chamomile, that type of thing. But if it's an oil that you would consider hot, like cinnamon or clove, that type of thing, black pepper, those are best to avoid in the bath. Think
now
gentle. You want gentle oils for your
now,
gentle parts.
and I think maybe make a little disclaimer about lavender in pregnant ladies.
Well,
Mhm.
all pregnancy with any oil, like the way that there are some reputable books that say these oils are safe in the first trimester, these are safe in the second trimester, but there's no studies seeing how many people had miscarriages when they were using oils. That doesn't exist. So we always um, err on the side of caution that nothing for while you're pregnant, we would not recommend anything topical or anything like that, bass. while you're pregnant. The only thing we would do is ginger by inhalation for nausea. And we had an unfortunate personal story where we had a miscarriage and we were using a soap. I won't say from where, but it was a lavender soap. And like, I wasn't even thinking about it, but afterwards, then you're always like, what you're like saying, did we do something wrong? Is it, and when I looked at that and I followed up with the manufacturer, I found that it was like a 14% dilution rate. And for it's like a ton of oil for a soap. And normally you would be at like 1%. So I don't know if that really had an impact, but I, especially lavender, to your point, which is probably why you were mentioning lavender specifically. When it comes to women and pregnancy and babies, it is best to err on the side of caution. And if you're going to do something anyway, talk to your medical doctor, make sure they're on board. But I know that they offer it all time. After yoga, they'll do like aromatherapy massages or like creams and things like that, just to like end it or begin with like a good scent. But if you're pregnant, err on the side of caution. I can't harp on it enough because it kind of hits close to home for us.
Hmm.
Yeah, that whole relaxation, like, it's relaxing too much, in
Yeah.
this case. Um, Now I wanna say your next talking point as I switch over tabs, dilution versus neat, and I think that's where
Yep.
some people don't realize what neat means versus, something else they might be reading in a book.
Well, first, like neat means that you're applying an oil without any sort of carrier or whatnot. And no matter what the oil is, I would say you want to dilute it anyway. Because what if you're allergic and you don't know? If you're allergic to like lavender, you'll be really allergic to the oil. So like the first time you use any oil, it's probably good to just test and make sure you're not having a reaction or anything like that. But the only three oils that we typically would recommend for neat application is lavender, tea tree, and the third one, which is just leaving my head, which will come to me. Lavender, tea tree, and there was a new one. Ah, now it's going to drive me nuts. Unless the negative outweighs the positive. So, for example, planner's wort, lemon neat will really help with planner's wort, but it burns. So in like situation like that, the burning of the lemon is better than the getting it lanced.
Hmm.
So if the pain of the oil is better than your alternative for whatever you're going to do with it, there's exceptions to that potentially. But other than that, you want to put it diluted. And like the little roll-on bottles that like Melissa has at the store, I unfortunately don't have any here. But they're like a real small little bottle. It's like a third of an ounce. A third of an ounce bottle, we would make that product typically at a 10 to 14% dilution rate. However, you're just putting a little bit on and rubbing it in. When you're using a cream, we put those at 1% because you're using a lot of cream and putting it all over the body. So like depending on how you're applying it, like you really less is more, and that cream you don't need a lot in there to have a really good effect. But if it's a roll on, you're applying just a minuscule amount, then you do need a higher rate.
Mhm.
And
I think
for go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think at one point we had talked, like, in one of those 15 milliliter roller bottles, it was, like, no more than 10 drops of any oil, be it you're putting
Hmm.
3 or 4 in, or if it's just 1 cent, like, it's no more than 10 drops in a 15 milliliter roller bottle.
I could tell you, I have a chart that's
What? You come with
dilution
that?
rate.
No way.
I made a chart. So like a dilution rate, if you have a third ounce bottle, a 10% dilution rate would be no more than 60 drops total for the little bottle. But that would still be a lot. Like if you were doing 10 drops, you'd be at like a 2% dilution rate
Hmm.
versus like a cream for an 8-ounce bottle of cream. You could put 144 drops into that bottle of cream and still be at a 1% dilution rate. So like you can see like for a third ounce, it would be 6% or 6 drops. So there is a lot of gradient in that.
What other ways?
Well, the controversial one that we'll speak to is ingestion. And here's the thing that the ingestion of aromatherapy or essential oils is considered aromatic medicine and technically should only be done by like a medical doctor who's also trained in essential oils. But where a lot of the confusion is when we talk about distillation rates, just so we can talk about ingestion a little bit more thoroughly. You have like your regular distillation where they put the plant matter in, they distill it, they get the oil. There's cold press, which is where your citrus oils come from. And then there's this fractionated process where they distill it, but then they take the matter and they continue to heat it until some of the volatile chemicals come off. And those ones are, and a lot of companies that do this, they say theirs are the purest and safest. Well, in part that's true because they've gotten rid of some of these like bottled chemicals, which I personally want in there. If I'm looking at a recipe book from aromacare, aromatherapy for healthcare professionals, they were using closest to nature oils versus this extra process. But when they go through that, now all of a sudden, uh, they can get an FDA label for it to be a supplement. And now you're having guidance on that bottle that yes, here you have those directions for that. So if that's where there's some gray area because there you'll go to the store and you will find essential oils that have a supplement label on them, and they'll say put a drop of lemon in your water or do this, do that. From the way that I'm trained, we would consider that aromatic medicine. We would steer clear of that. So like use your best judgment, but know that there's an additional process that those things go through. So you wouldn't want to grab my lemon and do that, but you could grab a lemon that has that supplement on it and potentially do that. Now, here's the other difference. With citrus, they usually go bad like 6 months to a year at the latest because they'll go rancid if they're not used. They're just sitting on the shelf. But if they go through this fractionated process, then it lasts for years. So if you have a citrus oil that's going to last for 5 years, you know that it's gone through that process. Where if it's a more recently pressed oil, it's only going to last for 6 months to a year, and then it's going to go rancid. So that's a good way you can tell if a company has used that process or not. I think that was just to talk about ingestion. At the end of the day, you really want to err on the side of caution. If there's 350 different components in rows, chemical components in rows, what if one of those is counterindicated with a medicine that you're on? So like, that it's just a lot of gray area. When you are putting it in topically, it's not being metabolized by the stomach, it's not going through the system like that. So like grapefruit ingested may be counterindicated with Coumadin topical. It's not actually going through the stomach using the enzyme which causes the conflict. So there's a lot of I would just err on the side of caution whenever you're looking at ingestion, but technically it's a valid way, but it would be best with a medical doctor and making sure that you're not doing something that's going to do more harm than good.
And obviously, hopefully, a doctor that has some aromatherapy training,
Yep.
right? That would
Yeah, and then there was like there was someone down in Florida at a show. I forget what company they were at, but they were giving people oil and capsules and honey, and the capsule opened in the person's throat and it caused burns in the esophagus because of the oil. So like, there's just when it comes to ingestion, I would say don't do it. Plus, like to get the measured dose, like if you're taking something for cramps or something like that, applying it topically in the abdomen versus ingestion, you're getting a measured dose because my metabolism is different than your metabolism, different than my son's metabolism, different than an 80-year-old's metabolism. You put in the skin, you're getting the same amount because it's not going through that metabolization process and breaking down. So like they just behave differently too. So like when it comes to ingestion, if unless you're using it for a supplement and you have like the guidance on the little thing from the company, I would not do it. But those are the main ways: inhalation, bath, which is really absorption, topical, technically ingestion if you have someone that can properly guide you with that. And I believe that's pretty much the big ways to use it.
now
I
you
don't think I'm missing
mentioned
one.
like briefly about carrier. Um,
Mhm.
do you want to just recap carrier and like what the differences are?
Yeah.
Be it like
So you
different
could
types of creams or oils?
when it comes to cream, anything unscented, because once you get into synthetic scents, like it can behave weirdly. And something that does not have petrolatum, which is petroleum jelly. The main reason being because it seals the skin, and the whole point of doing it is you want it in the skin. So you want to avoid petrolatum and anything unscented. When it comes to oils, you could use olive oil, you could use grape oil, almond oil. All of them are great. If you're making something you're going to use for a long time, my personal favorite is jojoba oil. It's actually a botanical wax. The reason being because it doesn't go bad. So if you put your oils in, say, grapeseed oil, that probably is only going to last 6 months, 8 months. It goes bad really quick. Have you ever smelled olive oil that sat too long and you get that whiff and you think, oh yeah, that's not good? Your oil carrier will go bad before the oils do. Oils don't go bad; they just lose. But other than citrus will go rancid. But all the other ones will lose potency after 2 to 3 years, with a couple exceptions. Like peppermint actually gets stronger over time. Eucalyptus gets stronger over time, but most of them will just decline. Um, I think that's it because I just lost my train of thought. So did that
So,
answer everything?
well, I know a lot of people will use fractionated coconut oil because it's got a longer shelf life, but jojoba right?
Yep.
Has the longer shelf
Jojoba.
life.
Yeah, it basically is indefinite. Like your jojoba oil is it's pricier than a lot of
Mhm.
things, but it doesn't go bad. So like if you have it and you're after a year, 2 years, that roller is still going to be good. The oils might have just lost a little potency, but the oil itself, the carrier isn't going to go bad. But you could also blend it, like our Featherlight blend that we use and massage therapists love. It is a blending of a whole bunch of different carrier oils. And if you're going through it in volume, then it doesn't matter. Use what you like. But if it's something that you're making product and you want to sell it or something like that, then the longevity of that. Because if you're making a whole batch at once and you might not sell them all at once, now that shelf life is an issue. So like it depends on what you're planning to do. But jojoba is a fan favorite for me.
Mm. So if they were making product to sell, it's going to be important for them to have their expiration, like made on date and expiration, either by the carrier or by the oils they have in there. If they're not using the jojoba, right? So
Even if they are using Hoba, I think there might be guidance that you have to put a date on it. I'm not really sure on that.
yeah, it might even depend on the state, like what you're required to put on there, and even country, I think. Um,
Hmm.
but keeping track of that, because you said, like you said, peppermint can get is stronger, and you've mentioned for a headache. But I know we talked at one point with peppermint, like for migraine, depending on the type of migraine, because it can
Yeah,
also make a headache worse depending
worst.
on what causes your headaches or migraines. So
Yeah.
what is the difference on there?
So like one type of headache is a constriction of the blood vessels, and for that, peppermint will open that because it's a vascular dilator. But there's another type of headache that is over blood flow to the blood vessels, and that if you add something that's going to dilate them more, will make the headache worse. And George had a funny. Actually, I did that to myself too. So like I've had firsthand experience with peppermint. George would tell the story that I did it to myself where I spilled in a class like peppermint oil. And I remember cleaning it up and I didn't put the paper towel in the trash in a timely manner. And while I'm teaching the class, I just started getting this huge headache. And I realized I just gave myself a peppermint headache. So, and George had done the same thing. He was filling things and he had spilled a bottle and he didn't bother to clean it up. And then he got a peppermint headache. So I guess I took after my teacher a little bit. And that's a good segue into if you spill oils, you want to get it up and get it into a container so that you're not getting an overstimulation of any oil. Because peppermint's not the only thing that you can get too much of. Like if you use too much lavender, it will keep you awake. I had that as an experience too with like Max as a kid. I would usually put a drop on like their onesie, their little sleep thing for when they would go to bed. And I believe I sneezed or I don't remember, but I put way too much, and then that he would not sleep that night. It was like the most restless night. So usually, like with aromatherapy, if you use too much, you get the opposite of the intended effect, and that's like across almost all the oils. So less is more.
It's Mother Nature's way of saying, "Stop it. That's enough, child."
And if you were to spill like a whole bunch of peppermint on you, for example, you would want to take like a cream, put it on loosely because the oil is going to absorb into the cream, and then wipe it off. Don't wipe it in. So if you have like a whole bunch of peppermint on, like you don't want to rub it in. You want to get something on that's going to help pull the oils out, and then it still might be like you might have some effects that aren't desired by having too much of an oil absorbed that way. So it's really just want to be cautious. And if
Yeah.
you get it in the eye wash, call a doctor because there was anything like that, you want to get that flushed out. Call the poison hotline if you were to end up getting like an oil in the eye. Whenever I teach, I would always have a little eye wash station just in case. Fortunately, I never need to use it. But I like to mention that too. Like, don't always believe everything you see on the online. We had, I used to have it printed out. There was somebody that went blind or had a lot of eye damage because they looked at something online for cataracts and they had someone had this aromatherapy blend and you massage it in the eye and they did that and it caused damage to their eye. So
Oh, wow.
just because it's online doesn't mean that it's accurate. And do your due diligence. If you see something online, Google it and see if you find it in other places. Because anybody could put up anything. There's no regulation on what's on a website for the most part. Like anybody could, and their brother could put up things. So just do your due diligence and look at consistency. And when in doubt, always play it conservatively. If we found a counter indication, we were very quick to add it in the book. But if we wanted to put something in as a positive, we wanted to see it in 3 or 4 places, preferably with actual case studies in a clinical setting.
So could people reach out to you, Hank, and be like, "I'm interested in using these. How would I, make, like an inhaler type thing or make a cream to use?"
Well, I do believe Melissa has the ability to order any said products that you might want because we're on Melissa's stream. So I would say, well, you should go to Melissa and say, "Can I get this?" And then Melissa will get it for you because I don't want to cut Melissa out when
Yeah,
she said we
well,
had to talk about aromatherapy. But yeah, they could.
okay.
Just tell me that you're from Goddess Elite because I would like to honor Melissa for any referrals. So like make sure. But there, we have like the stop smoking one that's already in an inhaler, and you can just get it, or you can buy a black pepper and like make your own. And I could show people how to do that. But we already have that done pre-made if people want
Mhm.
that. There's one for appetite regulation, one for breathing. There's ones for reducing or stopping smoking. So a lot of good options.
Now, do you guys have one for the seasonal allergies? Because that's where I'm like, I'm allergic to this
Hmm.
whole planet, but I feel like trying to use inhalation for oils might make things worse. So how do oils help or not help
The only
congestion?
oil, yeah, well, for the congestion, frankincense could possibly help it. It's bronchodilator, you get more oxygen. There's things like Ravensara or eucalyptus that are good for breathing. But the only oil I know of that has an antihistamine quality would be like German chamomile, but it is cost prohibitive because like a little bottle is like insane.
Mm. I was
And
waiting for you to
that's
be
all.
like, "It's patchouli," and I'm like, "We're done."
No,
Just gonna slam my laptop down and like, "We're done, guys." Like, we're done.
no, the German chamomile is technically has an antihistamine quality. But the other thing you would want to do is go get some local honey because the bees are pollinating from those plants that where you have the allergy, or if you're traveling and you're realizing I have allergies to whatever plants are around, the
Mhm.
local honey where the bees are pollinating that give you a small amount of the antigens or whatever, and it can help with the allergies. So
Maria, have
not
you tried
aromatherapy, but what's
yeah,
that?
kinda. I mean, it's a little bit of but it applies to the
Mhm.
topic. Maria, have you tried the honey for any of your allergies?
I haven't really tried the honey. I've been, where it goes for the fast, easy stuff, Claritin.
Claritin.
So I haven't, but I started really using my energy heating on myself for the allergy purposes, and it has helped. So, but I haven't tried any. The only essential oil I do use, there's only three of them that I use: lemon, lavender, and peppermint. And peppermint, it it helped me to stay up from driving to Michigan,
Mhm.
going to a class, getting out of the class, and still be completely alert to go to dinner. Because I really thought that I
Yep.
was going to be really exhausted and go back to my hotel room and just plunge in the bed. But that's what I did. I inhaled the lavender oil. I had a bottle with me. I inhaled a couple of sniffs before I went on the road, and it kept me alert after only having 2 hours sleep. So I can swear by the peppermint oil keeping you alert.
Yep. And to validate that in our instant energy boost, peppermint is one of the key oils that we use. It's peppermint, rosemary, lemon, and I think thyme, but they're all stimulating oils. And we marketed that a lot
Mhm.
to truck drivers who had to like drive a lot and stuff like that. So right on the money.
Yeah,
I I
Peppermint.
used to have one of
yeah.
those aromatherapy lockets, and I would either have peppermint on it or, like a Breathe Easy blend.
Hmm.
Because allergies for me, I hardly ever get sick, and if I do, it's a sinus infection, and it's always because of this congestion up in here. So I'd be walking around like huffing this pendant constantly to help keep all of that moving and to keep infections from setting in because the one blend had
Hmm.
like tree oil in it as well. Um, so that at least in my mind it worked. Um, but that chain broke, the pendant fell somewhere. I'm very
Oh
sad. I need
no.
to replace it.
Yeah, and for sinuses, we have a sinus relief roll on where you put it on like the sides of the nose, but the real key to it is you're applying a lot of pressure as you go down, and that pressure combined with the oil helps open up the sinuses and the sinuses to drain. So that I mean that's not directly for the allergies, but is helping with the symptom. So you can try different things.
Yeah. I mean, aromatherapy can help a lot. Now, I think for those of us who may have pets and want to see about using aromatherapy for pets, yay or nay, Hank?
Oh, see, I'm glad you. That was not on my talking points, but it probably should have been. For cats, no. Cats are very sensitive. They lack a enzyme or a component in their digestion that allows them to break down the oils, and pets can get really sick and even and possibly die. There's very few exceptions to that. There's a really good clinical aromatherapy book for pets. I can't remember the name of the author, but they talk about maybe some exceptions to that. But you really want to be careful, especially with cats and especially with birds. Birds are very sensitive with the olfactory system, so you'd want to make sure you don't have any diffusing things around birds and things. Dogs are fairly okay. You could rub it on their paws and things, or put it on like a little kerchief, and dogs would be able to have benefit from it. Horses, perhaps. I'm not really familiar with the more exotic animals, but cats no, birds no, dogs okay.
Okay. Because I know, us pet owners and lovers, like, we wanna take care of them too. And so the natural is like, if I can use it, they can use it.
Mhm.
No, not necessarily. And even for little people, like with the baby, you don't want to give them a lot of essential oils when they're first born. And maybe like one drop in a carrier cream rubbed into the feet, and then when they double in size, you can double the drops. But you want to be really mindful about how much you give, especially when their body mass is not a lot. When you
Mm,
think about it, like you don't want to use the same blend. Like George would say, if you wanted to put a roll on a baby, put it on you first, let it absorb a little bit, then rub it in a little bit, because you don't want them getting like a huge jolt of a lot of oils because their body mass just isn't up there.
there's less of them to absorb it.
Yeah, there's less of them to absorb. And
There's
and
less of
on that note too, since we bring up babies, if you're breastfeeding, it will go right into the breast milk. So you wanted not to use that even after pregnancy, like while you're breastfeeding, unless you're going to pump and dump, and that's not fun for anybody. A lot of work just to throw it out. So like until you're done breastfeeding, even you would want to be mindful about using oils while you're breastfeeding.
Now, why don't we get into some of the most common types of oils that we're either gonna see in the stores or that they've heard us talk about?
Yeah, let me go to my
So I
list.
know, like,
Well, I really believe like tea tree, just to bring up one, is like the Swiss Army knife of oils. It does so many different things. It's antiviral, antifungal. You can do like things with athlete's foot and all or fungus and stuff. But let me bring up my actual list here.
we got, like, black
This,
pepper, ylang ylang,
yeah,
oregano. If you wanna
well,
smell like an Italian dinner, get out your oregano.
you know what? It's kind of funny that some oils, because they have hormones in them, can induce labor and stuff, which is why we say not during pregnancy, except for when Anya was like getting ready to induce. Then we were giving foot rubs with oregano one time because we're like, we want the baby now, please. Uh, but there was like this one shop, this Italian restaurant. They actually had a joke going. They called it baby on the menu, baby eggplant parmesan, because so many women after eating this went into labor. And so they actually had a wall of pictures of all the eggplant babies from people who went there to eat. And then I was telling Anya, like, maybe we should go. Maybe we should go on a road trip. But then we were like, well, but then we might end up having the baby in another city, and we didn't want that. But
Right.
we joke about it, but it's no. So I'll just go from memory. Like tea tree is like it's a natural insecticide. It can help with insects and things. You can put it into a bug spray. You can apply that neat. That's why like tea tree and lavender, if you were to pick two, those two can do so much, and you don't necessarily need a carrier with it. The one thing with lavender, you want to make sure it's like the relaxing lavender. There's like a lot of species, and like spike lavender, for example, is a stimulant, and versus like a relaxant. So like you want to just make sure you're getting the right one. Let's see. I'm gonna just make this larger so I can actually go through. I'll just go through these as I kind of hit them. We talked about it. Yeah. Oh, I hit the button too fast. Where was it?
You haven't mentioned bergamot yet, and that's one of my favorites only because to me it smells like Fruit Loops. So
So one of the cool things with bergamot is its appetite regulating. So let me just read through this. I'll look these up. This is from my own manual, so like it's stuff I remembered at one point in time. It's just so much to remember. But bergamot good for anxiety, depression. It's uplifting. It's good for oily acne, skin type of things. So like if you have a child with um, going through puberty and they have like all kinds of pimples and things, there's like a three-part way that you can help them. One would be tea tree applied directly on the pimples to dry it up. Then you would use bergamot or another citrus, like a little bit in a oil as like just to get the oil off, and then a little bit of rose geranium or another hormone regulating oil in a cream, and you rub it in. So it's helping them with hormone regulation. It's helping them remove some of the oil, not all the oil, because if you remove all of it, like those little pads that they advertise, your body's response, if you remove all the oils, to make more oil,
Mhm.
and then the tea tree to dry them up. So there's like a three-part like hormone type thing, especially for puberty. But the bergamot was good, antibacterial, antiviral, anti appetite regulating. There was a study where they did in like a nursing home, they would weigh the food before, like when it went out, they would weigh the food afterwards so they could see how much the people were eating. And the ones that were getting some sort of bergamot diffusion, it actually helped them eat more. So it's regulated. It's not like it's going to make you like, I'm hungry, famished, I'm just going to eat. If you're eating too much, it can help bring you down. If you're not eating enough, it can help you come up. It's good for itching and private areas. It can increase white blood cell production, which is why it would pair really well with thyme because it also increases white blood cell production. Now, here's the bad ones: is one, it can be irritating in a bath. It is also photosensitizer. Any citrus will make your sun burn you faster. So if you like, even if you're not using aromatherapy, if you're getting a cream from the store and it has an orange scent and it's made with a real oil, and you put that on and then you go out, it will cause you to potentially burn faster. And for someone like Melissa, she'll just go and she'll be bursting into flames.
Yes. It's not a church that'll set me on fire. It's citrus oils outside. So life is tough sometimes. Life is tough.
Yeah. So lavender, and this is lavender augustifolia, which is from France. So like I mentioned, like different lavenders might have different properties, but like 1 to 3 drops can be used directly on the skin undiluted. It's good for a whole host of things: stress, sleeplessness, tension, burns. As we talked about the origins of aromatherapy, the modern day study came from someone who had gotten burned and put their hand into a vat of oil. Wounds and scars, especially lavender applied neat on like a scar from a surgery. If doing like a cross stitch massage, it can help with scars and
Hmm.
really help the skin heal. It's good for insect bites, yellow jacket stings. It's an analgesic. It's good for asthma, headaches, dementia, antibacterial, and good for skin toning. So that's everything I've listed for lavender. What was the next one? Give me any.
What about marjoram?
Marjoram. It's
Mhm.
good for storing. That's there was like one client of George's who it was like a group of firefighters, and they had bought it from George because he said it was good for snoring, and one of the firefighters like snored horribly, and they would put it on his pillow so that while he was sitting there breathing, it would counteract the snoring. So if you have a husband or a wife that snores or whatnot, you can try putting some marjoram on like anything that would be allowed to be diffused, or the diffuser by the bed or put on the pajamas. But it's good for insomnia, stress and tension, respiratory, muscle aches, sprains, muscle spasms, fibromyalgia, I'm sorry, not diverticulitis. Diverticulitis, you can use frankincense rubbed into the abdomen, though, since I mentioned diverticulitis, and like bed sores, it would be good for. And that's just really good, like marjoram, ravintsare, which is like not as common of a one, eucalyptus, peppermint, all really good ones, frankincense, or if you wanted to make a really good breathing one, those are all ones to consider, unless you're trying to sleep. If you're wanting to go to bed at night, peppermint, because like Maria was saying, like it helped her stay awake, you might end up staying up later than you want. So you gotta, think about what you want when you're going to be taking it too. So you can make a breathing blend for day, breathing blend for night. That's why we have two. We have a nighttime and a daytime. The difference, peppermint is not in the nighttime blend. Though
Hmm.
my mom swears by it and it doesn't keep her up. So like everybody's different.
Mhm.
Um, no, clary sage. Let me talk about that because it's just such a great oil. Um, it's hormone regulating and it contains a natural estrogen. So, like if you had like someone with breast cancer or something like that, those would be some exceptions where you might not want to use it. It's really good for hot flashes if you're hitting perimenopause or menopause. Reduces frigidity. That's how George liked to say aphrodisiac. He was like, it doesn't make you like go out and like just do everything, but it makes you more open to the experience. So whenever we say aphrodisiac, where I'm really speaking to, it just makes people more open. But reduces frigidity. It's a powerful balancing oil, euphoric. It's really grounding, muscle aches, increases creativity. Vicky, who's George's wife, when she would diffuse clary sage and do her stained glass, when she would take that product to a show, all that stuff just sold, sold, sold. Like she just had this extra creative lift. So if you're doing writing or poetry or anything artsy, diffusing clary sage could be amazing to as a benefit to your work. But it can cause night terrors if you combine it with alcohol. So like if you're drinking and then you're diffusing clary sage, it may cause like a night terror effect. So you want to be a little bit
Do not
mindful
use
about
that
that.
against people you don't like, guys.
Yeah, if you don't like them, then you go and you give them the alcohol and say, "Here, smell this too." It could also be counterindicated with some antipsychotic meds, psychotic meds. So if someone's like on antipsychotic, then clary sage would be potentially one to avoid. But you see, all these little things. This is why you really want to educate yourself when you're starting to use oils, and just make sure you have the full picture of what you're getting into, because it's really to be respected. The oils, it's like Mother Nature's pharmacy in a way, and we just want to make sure everybody has the information.
Now, do any essential oils need to be refrigerated ever?
I can't. I mean, a citrus might last longer in the fridge because they do go bad over time. But typically, if you want to keep them in a cool, dry place, it's really um, the the area that the oil is exposed to the air in the bottle even is what will cause the oil to like lessen over time and stuff like that. So it's more about the bottle, and it's light sensitive. So you want one of those dark blue or amber bottles to
Mhm.
keep out the light that would impact the oil. And then something with what they call it the head. So like you wouldn't want to put like a third of an ounce of oil in a big container like this. That's going to give you a lot more exposure to air. Those That's why the bottles are really small and narrow.
Mhm.
So like the type of storage, the bottle would be a factor to keep it better. But I think just the citrus oils would be the only ones I would say might have a benefit for being in a refrigerator. If it was a hydrosol, if you are making, so like after they distill the oil, they have all this water, right? So they have the oil and they have this water, and that's called floral waters or hydrosols. Hydrosols do need to be refrigerated. I don't think there's a lot of, you don't see that as much market
Mm-mm.
wise, like people selling hydrosols. But if you looked and you found hydrosols, you would want to make sure you refrigerate that because it is a whole different animal.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think you see them very out because they are such a temperamental product. Like you know, if I wanted to sell them, now I have to bring in a refrigerator just to carry that product. And then the client needs to go right home and throw it in a refrigerator when they're leaving me.
Mhm.
So, no coming to see me, get a reading, go get lunch, go shopping somewhere else, and then going home. Like, no, now you need to go right home and go throw that in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
So,
I can't say that I've ever noticed them. I speak to them because I was educated on it. I don't know if I've ever seen a hydrosol sold in the wild personally.
I mean, I've even looked, for them. Just I'm like, well, I could go to one of those wholesale clubs, get a small refrigerator, and I'm like, no, just no. Um, And that's the thing, right? So if it is a hydrosol, like, isn't that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are plants that you don't necessarily get oils out of. You get more of the waters or something to do with the you explained this forever ago.
Oh, yeah. There's not every plant makes an oil, and some
Mhm,
plants make oils with different parts, like juniper. Oh, let's see, what's a good one? Laurel berry versus laurel leaf, for example. There's two totally different oils from different parts of the plant. And then there's other plants that don't make any oil at all, and those would just be more like of an extract and things like that.
mhm,
I actually had stats on that. It's probably in the book, but I would have to fumble around finding it. But I had like one out of maybe 100 some plants make an oil. And of the ones that make an oil, they're not necessarily safe. So, like of the ones that have a safe oil, it's a relatively low percentage. We feel that we see a lot of it because we're going through these lists and there's a whole bunch of names of it, but it's not necessarily like an oak tree essential oil, for example. There's a whole bunch of plants that don't make any oil at all.
right. And what about flower essences versus hydrosols or oils?
I think flower. I'm not as familiar like Bach flower remedy type stuff, flower essences.
Yeah, kinda, either them or every now and then I'll see, like, when I was going down that rabbit hole for hydrosols, it was like I was seeing e flower essence. Those did not require refrigeration.
Yeah, I would think that it's probably not the essential oil, or it's an oil like it's a lot of other stuff, or they like an absolute. They might take like say you can get an oil out of essential oil out of lavender, but instead of just distilling the lavender, you put it in the cloth and you do the solvent and you distill that instead of 1 pound of oil from 220 pounds of lavender. Say you get 8. So like that's not really a pure oil, but you have all this stuff because you're also getting the extracts from all the other plant materials. So the oil is in there, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there too versus getting a straight oil. But
Hmm.
I'm not really familiar with flower essences to be able to speak to it
Okay.
100% confidently.
Yeah, that was just a random question that like popped into my head, and I'm like, oh, let's drive that
Yeah,
bus over and
I
ask.
can correlate that. Like I know you can get like a lot of other stuff out of plants besides like you get botanicals out of it. So it could be a botanical extract, but the oil may be in there, but there's other stuff too. Like that Yerba shampoo is amazing. It has all these botanical extracts, but very few of those are actual oils.
Hmm. Now, Maria, did you have any questions for Hank on oils or how to use them or anything under the
Mm,
sun?
Or
so
anybody out
the
there.
one thing that came to But the one thing that came to mind, Hank, is that I know that you said that some of the essential oils will counteract with medication that you are being prescribed to. How about essential oils counteracting each other?
They typically oils have a synergistic effect, so like they build on each other. Where you get into trouble is if you like with pharmaceuticals, if you let's take depression medication for example, they may have found a depression medication from isolating one chemical in an oil that has antidepressant effects, synthesized it, and now they have an antidepressant, but the counter indication of that medicine is sometimes suicide. Like they have
Mhm.
like so for depression medication, sometimes like they have these side effects that are just like crazy. And like George used to joke, he's just like, so they have this medication for like restless leg, but it can cause chronic gambling, infidelity, all this stuff. And so like George would joke around saying, so let me get this straight, doc. I lost my wife, I lost my savings, but my leg stopped twitching. So like but oils they build on each other and they have this beautiful synergistic effect. And I'm not familiar with any case offhand where they counteract each other. But as a blender, you would look for things that are going to go together well. Like if you're, I guess, if you're putting peppermint and lavender together, and that's what spike lavender. Like if you're trying to make a stimulant thing versus a relaxing thing, you could have two oils that are good for different things. But I would think they would more neutralize it, not be truly counterindicated.
Good point.
Okay.
That's what I was just kind of thinking. I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't want to put peppermint and lavender together, unless
It depends.
you
A
had,
spike lavender you could.
yeah,
Or,
true.
or you can put a whole crap ton of lavender so you have too much because the opposite, too much of an oil will cause the opposite of the intended effect. So, like, let me throw in the 80 drops of lavender and 10 drops of peppermint. That might keep you up.
Maybe I should try that instead of all the coffee I drink and see if I can get more
But
done.
you like coffee. Rumor has it it's your spirit animal.
It's my birthstone, coffee beans. It's my
There you go.
birthstone. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even today, and I'm like, I've already drank 2 cups of Death Wish, and I'm standing here with the Celsius in my hand, and I'm like, I could take a nap right now. Like, this is a stay upright and keep moving. So if I sit too long, I'm done. And
Yep.
they're like, "Get more coffee," and I'm like, "It is not gonna help." Like, we have
Wh-
crossed that threshold.
One thing that comes to mind, not so much counterindicating with each other, but like if you take an aspirin every day or pain relief medication, your body builds up tolerance. And it's worth mentioning that
Mhm,
with essential oils, your body doesn't build up a tolerance to oils necessarily, but like arthritis could worsen. So like the essential oils are going to be doing the same thing um, for your arthritis, for example. But if your arthritis gets worse, it's not that you build up a tolerance to the oils. You may just have had a worsened condition and then more oils are needed to offset the pain or whatever you're feeling. The exception to that is long-term toxicity. There was a guy who he was chewing like big red gum, like a lot, and he ended up with all these weird medical conditions, and they couldn't figure it out, and it ended up being long-term cinnamon toxicity poisoning because he
hmm,
was constantly chewing big red gum, and there's not,
mhm,
they actually have cinnamon oil in that gum, and it wasn't something that happened overnight, but over a long period of time, he ended up with this weird complication. So, like, if you're going to be doing like daily stuff, it would be good to give yourself a break and like rotate through because you wouldn't want to. I haven't heard of any other real examples of that, but like that's something to be mindful of. Is if you're going to use the same oil every day for 10 years, maybe then in that case you'd want to look at the textbooks, like long-term toxicity poisoning, because they actually uh, test out on animals, unfortunately, where they would give a certain
Mm.
dose for animals, and when a certain number of the population dies, that's when they consider it a lethal dose. So yeah, it's something to be considered, especially if you're using something as a supplement. Like if we're talking at full circle from the beginning, if you're using an oil and it has supplemental things, I don't know if the oils from that fractionated process that with the chemical compound that could be for long-term toxicity is gone or not. So like it would be good to rotate it. Just like probiotics, do 3 months on, switch it up, do something different. There's a bazillion oils that do similar things. You could easily rotate the oil and use, instead of lavender, Roman chamomile, instead of Roman chamomile, use cedar, and so on.
Mhm. Now,
Does that rule apply also for shampoos and lotions that has essential oil?
Yeah, you know, I guess it would depend on the dilution rate and stuff. I don't know.
you stumped them, Maria. Good job.
Mm.
Well, and a lot of shampoos are not even putting in like actual, like they're using synthetic scents and things. But if it's like real aromatherapy, then I think over time that might be something
Yeah.
to look at, especially if it's something like eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is like one of the most toxic oils that you can get, and like a very small quantity, if it smells good and a kid were to drink it, that could cause issues. So that, on that note, you also want to make sure they're up out of reach of young ones, because if you're opening cinnamon and boy, that smells like that red fireball candy I like so much. You don't want a kid drinking that and then having all kinds of complications and problems because they ingested a large volume of oil. So
Mhm.
good food for that too.
Now, while we wait for some questions, I think the last thing we haven't talked about yet were three oils that were listed as less common but good to know about. And you kind of went over German chamomile because of the histamine, antihistamine. But you
Yeah.
have carrot seed and wintergreen.
Okay, so carrot seed. A reason I like that one is it's good for precancerous skin conditions. So allegedly, uh, so if you had anybody that was having like some questionable areas, like carrot seed oil would be really good for that. It's also amazing, amazing, amazing for skin in general. And also can slow the progression of wrinkles. So use carrot seed and frankincense, which can be good for age spots. That combination is stellar. Um, so what was the other one? Oh, wintergreen. I put in there because you can overdose on it very easily. So wintergreen is a natural aspirin, and like in the arthritis one that we do, it's like a very small quantity of wintergreen, because if someone were to put too much on, like you could actually have aspirin poisoning. So stuff like that, it's a really good example that some oils you just want to, less is more always, and it smells so good, but you don't want to use too much of it. But that's great for analgesic if you were to add that into a cream for arthritis. That's why it's in our arthritis one. Um, like arthritis, you really have three things you want to look at. You have the analgesic part of it, you have circulation part, and what was the other one? Circulation, analgesic, and I can't remember. Uh,
Anti-inflammatory or
Thank you. Anti-inflammatory. So you have like Roman chamomile or Camellia that would be good for inflammation, and you have wintergreen, clove that would be good for as an analgesic, and then for circulation, circulatory increasing, you have things like rosemary and ginger. Just to give some examples of each. So when you're thinking about whatever you're looking to help yourself with, what are the components of that element? And then what oils would support each one of those? And just pick one or two. There's a bit of an intuition when it comes to this too, because a hormone regulating oil, there's literally 50. So like, how do you pick? And that's where you kind of like go from the heart, because you could pick any different oils. Maybe sometimes it's just what do you have available, what's for sale at Goddess Elite, and you get what you can. But if you have a whole bunch of options, then you kind of feel in the heart like what is going to be the one that I'm going to pick for that. And then what was the other one that you had mentioned?
uh, so we went over the German chamomile, carrot seed, wintergreen. Oh, and then I see down here Litzia Mei.
Oh yeah, so that one,
Mhm.
it smells like a citrus. The reason I put it in there is there were some case studies where they were showing that inhalation may have helped a lot with lung conditions, especially of cancerous nature. So that's why I really liked that one. But if you wanted like a citrus note to an oil, that one is great because it doesn't have, it's not really a citrus. So it doesn't go rancid like a regular like orange or a lemon would, but it gives that like citrusy kind of vibe to it. But Mei Chang, it's a deodorant, it's antiseptic, it's good for digestion, it's a sedative, disinfectant, and good for stomach type stuff. It's one that you do always have to dilute, but the real magical part with that one is just because there's so many people with the big C word, various types. I really like that one for inhalation because they have been shown to possibly help with that kind of stuff. So that's why I was putting some of those in there. The carrot seed, um, this Mei Chang, they're really good for the big C, allegedly.
Allegedly, right? Because we
Allegedly,
can't diagnose, prescribe, diagnose, tell you to do one instead of the other.
yeah.
We are not allowed to do that, and we're not going to.
You know,
Uh,
and aromatherapy has so much scientific background and different things with case studies. But I would say, no matter what you're using all this for, take a moment and ask, whatever's showing up in your physical body, is it showing up because there's something spiritually that's gone awry? Because just dealing with the symptoms, whether it's from a doctor's prescription or from Mother Nature, if there's like something else going on, like resentment is resulting in fibromyalgia, for example, like do take a look at yourself in the mirror and ask, like, is what's showing up a manifestation of something I'm ignoring? And I know that's a little bit more on the woo side than the science side, but like looking at it holistically, where else do I have to look besides putting a cream on or roll on or diffusing something? Is there something I need to look at from an emotional perspective, a spiritual perspective, a mental perspective? And then kind of line that up with what you're doing for the body. All
but
right. Until
thanks,
next time.
guys, and we'll see
Bye,
you next
guys.
week. Bye.
Bye.